Hello, and welcome to the Landing in Japan podcast, where we talk to the people in the know about living, working, and traveling in Japan. Whether you're a tourist planning your first trip or a professional looking at starting a business in Japan, thank you so much for tuning in.
Join us as we explore the many regions of this fascinating country and take a deep dive into its people and culture.
Your hosts are me, Sam Barker, and my excellent co-host, Gerard O'Sullivan.
Great to be here, Sam, on this beautiful day in Himeji. And without further ado, let's introduce our guest today. We have Remi Lopez from Japan Tour Adventure.
Welcome to the show, Remi.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So just to get us started off, Remi, I just want to talk a little bit about your background. Why did you come to Japan? And maybe if you talk about some of the little different jobs that you've taken in Japan that have led you to your current position.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my first initial project before when I was in my home country, which is France, by the way, I just wanted to be able to speak Japanese. That was a long time dream to me. And through the years, this dream just evolved into like more of a professional project. Learning Japanese was just becoming the first step of a long journey, hopefully taking me to Japan to have a career there. And it wasn't easy. It was, well, there was a lot of different challenges that I had to face, but well, looks like 13 years later, I made it. So I graduated from business school in France, and for many years, even before I come to Japan for the first time, I wanted to be able to speak Japanese, so I never had the chance during my studies. So I decided to, well, take the chance, go to Japan as a tourist, and while I was in Japan, just look for the best school possible. I did my homework before flying to Japan to select some schools, and I visited them, and finally, I just selected one that was just a perfect fit for what I wanted to do, for my budget, the location, everything. And I came in Japan in September 2010. Well, as a student, not for university, but just for Japanese language school. And I studied Japanese at school for a full year, 12 months, plus an extension of 3 months as a tourist while I was looking for my first job with a sponsor, which is probably the hardest challenge a foreigner can face here, to stay in Japan, because as you might be familiar with, especially Gerard, visiting Japan is amazing. Studying in Japan is great. Staying in Japan is it's a whole new level.
So what if I can jump in there, what made you first want to come to Japan? What was the first? So you always wanted to learn Japanese, but why? What was your motivation?
Yeah, so the motivation changed as I was getting older, but if I had to give it a start, it would be obviously probably the pop culture, essentially animation and mangas. I was actually fascinated by the imagination of Japanese. Who could just create such amazing stories with so many interesting characters and plots? And I was thinking, like, my God, it would be amazing to see the country of people who made that happen, because I was a huge fan. Later on, especially during my years in the business school, I was more fascinated about their philosophy. Especially during one specific class, when I had to do management philosophy, I had a teacher who was actually very into every Buddhist meditation and things like that, which wasn't really my thing, but he was very knowledgeable about the Asian culture, generally speaking, and Japan is part of it, so he knew a lot about Japanese culture. And when I wrote an essay on management philosophy, taking one of the biggest CEO in Japan, non-Japanese CEO in Japan, who was Carlos Ghosn, and I compared him with the old-fashioned Japanese way, such as the samurai, to live their life, and how to apply those old concepts and precepts into the modern society. My teacher actually read that essay and said to me directly, Remi, I have a feeling when I read what you wrote that it's just much more than just homework. You have a real passion for that, and you should see it with your own eyes. So if you have the chance, you should go, because I believe that it is not just a class to you, it is a passion.
Yeah.
So this is how everything started, and this is how I thought, well, I've never really thought about going to Japan because I've never thought it would be possible, but I always wanted to be able to speak Japanese, and from that moment, being able to speak Japanese just became the first step of what I hoped would become a new life in Japan for me.
Yeah, it makes sense. We did have a little bit of a discussion before we started recording about your philosophical background. I think it's really, really interesting because you said that you developed this philosophy before you'd even come to Japan, or rather, you'd been studying the philosophy, created an image of it in your mind, and then you started working in Japan, which I think is a very, very unique way of doing things. So you hadn't even come to Japan. So once you were in Japan, how did this study of philosophy that you'd done influence the way you started looking for work, your projects? Talk little bit about how the two sort of intersected.
Well, like many foreigners who decided to, give it a chance and stay in Japan for more than just visiting, I was shocked by one big difference. Living in Japan and working in Japan is a whole new world. You just have all the positive, and you have fun, and you spend your money when you travel, which you can probably apply to every country when you travel. But to me, Japan is not just a different country. It's a whole new planet. It's like you just land in a different world. Nobody understands you, and everybody's curious about you. And it doesn't matter where you go, especially if you leave just a big city, you will always considered as an outsider. So it was very fascinating at the very beginning, but years after years, it became more of a frustration sometimes.
Sure.
And not because they were, discriminating me negatively. It was actually the opposite. They were so nice. And just because I do not look, like them, I don't look Asian, generally speaking, they assume that I will never be able to understand what they say. So even though I was speaking Japanese to them, in their mind, I was not speaking Japanese, and they just thought that if they started to speak Japanese to me, I wouldn't understand. So this is how careful those people are, and how much attention they can actually give us, just because they don't want to offend us and they want to make everything easy to us. I believe that my country is the complete opposite. French would more say something like, speak French or go home. This is that side of natural kindness that really, really made me feel like I was at the right place. And then at some point, it became just too much to me. But I know that if you just show them the truth, if you just state from the very beginning that, listen, for example, if I'm talking to someone, you say, oh, listen, everything I'm saying now, you understand me because I'm speaking Japanese to you. And then if you show them the truth in front of their face, if you just explain to them that clearly I'm speaking Japanese and that's the only reason why you understand what I'm saying, they will just realize that you are speaking Japanese, and they will start considering you as one of their own. That is the very first step of being accepted by the community, that they will start talking Japanese to you naturally, so they will stop literally to consider you as an outsider. That is the first step of being accepted in a community, but that is just the first one. Many other challenges I had to face professionally. That's the first one I just told you about, is about just the life in Japan as a resident.
Yeah.
What challenges did you face in your work life then? Once, or also studying Japanese here in Japan?
Yeah. So studying Japanese, my biggest challenge was actually to keep up with the Chinese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, basically, you're probably aware of that, but the first, historically speaking, the first writing style used in Japan wasn't even Japanese made, it was Chinese. Cool. That was introduced by China in the mid-500, and because of that, when Chinese come here, they know the countries already. They know the characters, they know what they mean. In over 90% of the case, it is the same meaning. You just have to learn a new sound to apply it in the Japanese language. But for us, we have to learn the characters from the very beginning. To us, it's just drawings. There's no words, there's no sound, there's no meaning. It's just drawings. So we have a very clear disadvantage when we start at the Japanese school. So at some point, it is just about absorbing as many kanjis as possible and remember them. And this is where you just fall far behind the Chinese, because the whole class is going at Chinese speed and you can't keep up, because it's just an unfair situation. Which is the reason why I stayed in the Japanese school only 12 months instead of 15 initially planned, because I realized that the next 3 months would just be a waste of time and money, as I would never, literally, humanly speaking, it wouldn't be impossible for me to keep up with them, because the situation was just too unfair. And it's not their fault, it's just the way it is. So studying, that was my biggest challenge when reaching a higher level of Japanese skills and knowledge. After that, it's just about learning on your own new meanings and new kanjis, and there's no way you can keep up with Chinese or Taiwanese or anyone in speaking Cantonese and Mandarin, because most of the time the kanjis all have the same meaning.
Because as you said previously, language is step one to kind of understanding things, right? If you can't speak the language, there's not much you can do.
Yes, that is correct. And then what you have to do, because, well, based on the fact that it takes a long time to learn a new language, then what you have to do during that time learning, you also have to learn and study the culture. And that's when you start, well, behaving like them. Because I truly believe that if you have assimilated, if you have really absorbed everything about the language, you also have the culture and the mind, which is very true. I truly believe that when you really have not necessarily mastered, but when you have accepted a new language, you also have accepted the reflection of the language, and usually it's the culture and the behavior, the mind. So I can clearly tell you that when I speak Japanese, I'm extremely nice. I am so nice that it's kind of frustrating sometimes. But when I start speaking French, well, I could fill up a dictionary of swearings in 2 minutes probably.
So it's oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Gerard.
No, I was gonna say, so it's kind of like a 3-step process of like language, culture, and then philosophy or psyche, mind.
Yes, you have accepted their culture, but it doesn't mean you understand it yet. You just have accepted it, and you started this is kind of a mimic, actually, you just accept the fact that to be accepted among them, you have to behave like them. And it's a little bit like the, anthropology, because as I said, Japanese don't behave like most people on Earth. They have their own culture, and they've been isolated for so long that they haven't changed their mind yet. Especially if you start talking to anyone above like 50 or 60 years old, who probably have never traveled anywhere outside of Japan, most of them, they will just behave like they used to behave 50, 60, 70 years ago, before even the first foreigners come to Japan on a regular basis. So they would still really feel like traditional and conservative, probably, but that is just the way the Japanese culture is. So yeah, as I said, the first step would be the language. The second step is to accept the difference of mind and to accept their culture. The third step is to change your mind into their mind, to be able to, to be able to reach the point where they consider you as one of them. And I'm not just talking about, the personal and the community. I'm also talking about respect and business. And that was probably the hardest challenge I had to face when I created my company in 2019.
Could you talk a little bit more about Japan Tour Adventure? Obviously, I know that that's your current project that you're working on right now. Just the floor is yours to just talk a little bit about that, how you came to it, all the different things you do, because there's some really exciting stuff you're doing with it.
And of course, for those who don't know about it yet, tell us briefly what you do there.
Very well. Well, thank you for asking. Actually, I started to work as a teacher in 2011, and I like teaching. I really like teaching. but I love guiding. A friend of mine asked me if I wanted to give it a shot to working as a cycling guide, because he knew that I could speak Japanese, that I was a cyclist actually, and that I could do some maintenance on the bicycle, which is really coming handy when you have something on the, doing a tour. And he knew that I used to study like Japanese culture and history on my own time because I just like it. So he gave me a shot. I showed up and I was hooked up on day one. And I realized that I really like teaching, but I love guiding and I love showing people a different face of Japan and to explain them why I stayed, not why I came here, but why I stayed. Because obviously, any culture is not perfect. You always have, pros and cons. But the reason why I stayed is obvious. Well, that's because the pros definitely wins over the cons for the Japanese culture compared to my country. I feel so well here. Nothing's perfect, but it's way better than what I could probably get in my country at the moment. And when I started working as a guide, not full time, but more regularly in 2016, I started to think like, as a traveler, I did a few guided tours. And one day in Japan, during my first trip in 2010, I did one tour only in a bus with a lot of people I have never met in my life. And I thought, okay, that could be a nice time to, to go long distance, to see something I wouldn't see on my own, and maybe to meet a lot of people I've never met in my life and making new friends. After a couple of hours in the bus, I just said, listen, just drop me here, keep your money, keep my money. I don't want it. I just want to end that tour because this is just horrible.
Oh, wow.
I realized that being in a bus for hours and just looking through the window is not what I consider as traveling and as an experience. So I just remembered about that experience, and I thought, my God, I wish I had my own company, because I would love to design tours that I would be willing to do myself as a traveler. And of course, as a guide, I love the tours I was doing in Kyoto, by the way, on a bike. But they were not mine. They were not my tours. And I knew I didn't have any right on, creation of products, obviously. So I started to think about it. And in 2018, I decided to do my own market study. And I finally ended up with, okay, if I create my company, I would start in Nara, because to me, it's an amazing place with a beautiful balance between modern city and nature. And I know that it's been underused as a touristic destination, as most people just go to see what is, Instagrammable, and then would go home. Most of them wouldn't even stay for the night because they don't know how beautiful and rich what that city has to offer on daytime or on nighttime. So I knew I had a huge potential. But then I had to get started. I had to buy my bicycles. I had to think about itineraries. I had to discover the city on my own as well. It took a long time. And in 2019, finally, I just jumped in and I created the company. And I officially created the company on May 1st, 2019. The website was online on June 1st, and the first tours were bookable on July 1st. And within a couple of weeks, we had our first guests. So it was quite a challenge at the very beginning, because I had no idea what I had to do in this country, as I was just discovering a new dimension in Japan, which is the business dimension, especially the entrepreneurship, which was totally new to me. But it was actually not so hard to create your activity as an entrepreneur. A company, a registered company, is a whole new level, which we just accomplished today. I am not joking. Today, I am officially registered as a limited liability company today.
Wow! Congratulations!
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you very much. It is hopefully still the one of the steps to a long road to come.
Absolutely.
But I designed the first experiences in Nara in a way that I would have loved to do it myself as a traveler if I knew nothing about the country. I always try to create new experiences and product that I would have loved to do it myself when I had the chance in 2010, when I came to Japan the first time. And I promised, honestly, that's something I would never do. But if one day I start creating a bus tour, just close my company for me, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, can you tell us a little bit about what makes the experiences of your company of Japan Tour Adventure different from other companies or different from other tour operators?
Yes, absolutely. The biggest thing is that I try to apply the Japanese philosophy I've been learning and studying for many years, and I try to apply those concepts of philosophy and Japanese culture and mind into my experiences, and it all starts with dealing with the locals.
Yeah.
I don't care about taking people to a 5-star restaurant with 5,000 reviews on social medias. No, because that restaurant, anybody can find it. What I want is to create unique connections with unique places when there's not a single word in English, so people know that from the moment you step inside, you are in a real Japan. You're not in a touristic place, and you're not in an international friendly atmosphere that would feel like you're not doing anything special. It's actually kind of a concept I wanted to develop, which is basically you're getting lost with an interpreter. Your guide will always be there with you, but even if you get lost, even if you have the feeling you don't understand anything, you have a safety net, and the safety net is us. And that's what makes it unique, because most people just take people where they want to go, because they know exactly, as they heard about it on books, on social medias, on internet, and they say, okay, yeah, I would like to do this like everybody else. No, what we do is that we take you where you didn't know you wanted to go.
Makes sense.
And that makes the whole difference. For Nara, for example, of course, we take people to the major landmarks such as Todaiji, the biggest Buddha, because everybody wants to go there. But then we had a 750 years old of tradition, former katana maker, an actual knife maker, original company since 1889 as a knife maker in Nara, between the two landmarks, to make it special. And most people actually don't realize how amazing this place is until they get there. And most people realize how special it is, and they are so thrilled. And if you looked into the comments on social media, of course, because we cannot really avoid it as a guiding company, most of the time people mention the knife company as one of the highlights of the tour, even though that was a place they didn't know about. They wanted to see what they saw on the internet, and they realized that the most memorable place was the place they didn't know about. And that's what we want to see. That's what we want to make people feel, which is creating connections with locals and showing how amazing it is once you get off the beaten tracks. And that is usually our biggest challenge, because before being able to take people where we are taking them on our experiences right now, the biggest challenge is to create connections with those places, those companies, those local communities that we highly respect, and we want people to see how amazing they are. But to be able to gain their trust, that's when the philosophy kicks in, because we have to understand how Japanese think, and we have to show them what we have to offer. We have to respect them. And we start from a kind of a employer's employee position. And in that case, we're not the employers. We are the employee, because we haven't gained their trust yet. They don't know us, and they don't know what we can provide. They don't know what we can do for them. So our first challenge is to gain their trust, and step by step, and usually we count in months, we finally reach a level of equality, and we don't have any employer's employee point of view anymore. We have a partner and collaborators point of view. And when we reach that level, it means they have accepted us, and that we are part of their private community. And that applies to anywhere, but it can take months or it can take years. You should never rush it with Japanese, because as soon as you ask something, if you haven't reached that level of equality, they will just say no, because they will be afraid. So the biggest challenge is to gain their trust. And for our very unique, actually, because we're the only one offering that experience in Sakai City, to a backstage multi-generation knife company, we don't take people to a shop or to a store or even a touristic place. We take people backstage to a real Japanese knife company office when you can see everything, the process of knife making step by step. And we are the only one authorized to come inside.
Wow.
Even though we're not Japanese, and that connection took 2 years to build.
Yeah.
Still,
amazing.
and still after 2 years, we can only take people on Tuesday morning and Thursday morning.
Wow.
because the staff is just worried, and we are still in a trial period.
Sure.
Still, that tour was created in 2020 and was officially released in 2022. So after a year doing this tour, we are still on the trial period. But it goes very well, and everybody is really happy so far, especially the president of the company, which is probably one of the most important person to deal with, obviously. And my personal philosophy at the moment is, if everybody's happy, I'm happy. I'm not trying to get rich with a tour. I'm trying to make a decent living with many people working with me together, so we can actually show how amazing Japan can be off the beaten tracks, and how affordable it can be if you don't hit the most touristic places, where most of the time, let's be honest, and it doesn't apply just to Japan, but everywhere in the world, everything is overpriced. So it can show you that when you dare going off the beaten tracks, you can get something actually better for less.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, it is cheaper, it is just the best deal you can get, because you don't go where everybody goes. And that's the whole point. We do quality over quantity.
Makes sense. And really valuing that deepness, that richness of experience. Like you said, getting lost with an interpreter. It's about that deep, rich experience for tourists, not just, like you say, the kind of bus tour being the antithesis of what you're sort of doing.
Yeah, and I believe that if you really do it, and if you're really honest with everyone, you do it for real, your guest will thank you in the future, because they will realize how special it was after they finished it. And just recently, Gerard saw it as well. I believe it was yesterday or before yesterday, we officially became on TripAdvisor the #1 company tour providers just 2 days ago.
Amazing. So there you go, from strength to strength.
Yeah, even though we created the company in 2019 and we had a 3 years break. So basically in a year of activity, we beat everybody else.
There you go.
So if I could just jump in there with one more question, is, as you say, a 3-year break is a nice way of putting it. So obviously you started your company just before COVID-19. How did that affect your business, and how did you get through that period when you just started and then suddenly you're thrown into the pandemic?
Yes, it was very, very a hard challenge to face. Like everybody else, probably, you can definitely confirm what I'm saying, Jared. In 2020, as I was still teaching part-time a little bit, waiting for the business to take off, I was supposed to quit teaching in 2020, but I could keep part of my teaching position. So I could barely, but I could financially survive. I just had no idea it would take so long for Japan to reopen, but I should have known, because I learned how to understand their feelings and their mind, and I know how careful they can be. I just had no idea how worried they could be at the same time. So I was kind of lucky at the same time, because I basically consider myself as Forrest Gump, if you see what I mean. For the shrimp boat, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I was getting started. I didn't have much invested. I didn't have a lot of charges every month besides the bike I invested in, the rent for the storage location, but that's it. Besides that, I didn't have any. I didn't have a dozen of employees. I didn't have a lot of charges to pay every month besides the bike location and maybe the website. So I could cover everything with my teaching salary for the last 2.5 years. And because I couldn't keep my full shift as a teacher, I used all my spare time to keep reminding people that we were here, and we didn't disappear because of the pandemic. We're here, and we're here to stay. So I used my time to invest in content production, to study photo editing and video editing, to perfect as much as possible the website and to work on communication and social media to show people how great we can be, and that we will be there when they come back to Japan once it's reopening.
Yeah.
So it was a long journey, and probably much longer than anybody could have expected. But we were lucky, as during those 2.5 years, I've seen countless companies and workers just closing, going bankruptcy because they had too much to cover every month and they couldn't afford to keep going like that.
Yeah.
So I consider myself honestly a little bit lucky about that, because I just created a company and I wasn't big enough to drop from a high position, so I could actually stand.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Remi, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's been an incredible discussion. Just to wrap things up, we like to sort of ask some more chill questions. So I'm going to ask you, you did mention anime earlier on. I can't help but want to know a little bit more. I don't think that's too uncommon, honestly. There's plenty of us that had our interest in Japan started through that. So Remi, what's your favorite anime, or what was the anime that kind of first inspired your interest in the medium?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I believe a lot of people are coming for that reason in the first place.
I think so. I think that's just
so.
the truth.
Yeah, as a kid, everything started with Dragon Ball, like most people. But actually, when I was 7 years old, my cousin gave me VHS, which was
Showing your age.
the Princess in the Stars. That was the translation of the French title, which was totally inaccurate, because I learned later that was actually Ghibli, the Valley of the Wind.
Oh, makes sense.
Okay.
And that actually made me understand Japanese mind better, because it was all about respecting nature, or nature will fight back. And unless you find harmony, you will not be able to live together. So you have to find a common ground. And that's the whole Japanese mind, actually. Respect nature, or you will just get kicked in the ass. And that is very what Japanese are trying to teach their kids through Ghibli animation most of the time, because human is the only species that doesn't care about what they're doing. They just do things the way they want, and they don't care about spirits as nature. And at some point, nature has enough and will start fighting back.
Cool.
So that is everything started. But if you want my favorite anime, or maybe my favorite manga in my age, it would be something darker and definitely more sophisticated, I would say, and beautiful art. It's called Berserk.
Oh yeah. No, I'm a big fan of Berserk as well. So pretty unforgettable.
Yeah. Yes, Kentaro Miura sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and hopefully we will get the end of the story with the assistant, but still not many news so far.
Well, Remi, thank you so much once again. It's Remi Lopez, Japan Tour Adventure. You can find that online, Google it around, make sure to check it out. Remi, thanks so much for your time again. This has been Landing in Japan with me and Gerard, and we look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
you.